Ready for a deep dive into some serious aviation tech?
Always.
Today, we're zeroing in on Northrop Grumman, those stealth tech wizards. They've got something new, and trust me, it's not your average plane reveal.
Oh, this I've got to hear. What have they been up to?
It's called the Model 437 Vanguard. And the story behind it, let's just say it involves top-secret projects, plot twists, and enough intrigue to make even the most jaded aviation buff do a double take.
All right, you've got my attention. Lay it on me. What's the deal with this Vanguard?
Imagine this. Northrop Grumman, kings of stealth, are working on this super-secret drone. They're picturing it as the ultimate wingman, a silent partner for fighter jets in a dogfight. But then, and this is where it gets really good, they do something totally unexpected.
They ditched the whole drone thing and build a regular jet?
Nope, even better. They release footage not of a drone, but of this sleek, almost futuristic-looking jet with a cockpit. It's like they took their top-secret drone project and said, you know what, let's let a human fly this thing too.
Wow. Talk about a plot twist. So they've got this jet that can be flown by a pilot or as a drone.
You got it. It's a hybrid design, which, as you can imagine, has everyone buzzing. So the big questions are, why? Why design an aircraft that can be both unmanned and piloted? What's the thinking there? And what does this mean for the future of aviation, not just for the military, but for all of us?
Those are some seriously big questions. So where do we even start with something like this?
Well, luckily, our friends over at Spotlight Military got an exclusive first look at the Model 437, and they were kind enough to share some details.
Always appreciate Spotlight Military for their insider access. So what did they have to say? What are we looking at with this Model 437 Vanguard?
Picture this. A jet that looks like it flew straight out of a sci-fi movie. Sleek, predatory, with this bubble canopy that gives the pilot an insane field of vision.
Sounds impressive. And what about that nose? What's the design like?
The nose is perfectly pointed. With this long dorsal air intake, it just screams speed and agility.
It sounds like they took inspiration from all the coolest fighter jets out there.
Oh, absolutely. But here's the thing. They also incorporated those classic stealth design elements. You know, those swept wings, designed to basically disappear on radar.
Right, like a ghost in the sky.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that distinctive chain line that runs along the fuselage, pure aerodynamic genius.
They definitely know a thing or two about stealth. But design is one thing. What's powering this thing? What kind of engine are we talking about?
This thing's packing a single Pratt & Whitney PW535 engine.
Okay, so we're not messing around here. That's a serious piece of machinery.
No kidding. We're talking 300-400 pounds of thrust, capable of propelling the Vanguard to a cruising speed of Mach 0.8.
Mach 0.8. That's incredibly fast. What about its range? How far can it fly on a single tank?
Try a range of 3,000 nautical miles. We're talking practically flying from Los Angeles to New York without stopping.
That's impressive. And it sounds pretty big, too. What are we talking about size-wise?
It's got a wingspan of 41 feet and a maximum takeoff weight of 10,000 pounds.
Okay, so not exactly a lightweight.
Nope. But it can definitely pack a punch thanks to its internal weapons bay.
Speaking of firepower, what kind of weapons are we talking about here? What can this thing carry?
Well, Spotlight Military mentioned they've tested it with at least 2 AMRAAM missiles.
AMRAAMs. Those are serious air-to-air missiles. We're talking about taking out enemy aircraft from a distance. This isn't your average drone weaponry.
Not even close. So we've got this crazy, fast, stealthy jet with some serious firepower, but the question remains.
The million-dollar question, why? Why go through the trouble of making it optionally manned?
Yeah.
Why not just a drone or just a piloted jet? What's the advantage of having both?
Exactly. Why design an aircraft that can be both unmanned and piloted? That's where things get really interesting.
Well, for starters, it gives Northrop Grumman a way to test the waters with unmanned tech, but still have that human touch when they need it. It's like a stepping stone, right?
Okay, so they're dipping their toes into AI-powered flight before they cannonball into the deep end.
Exactly. But it also gets around some of the hang-ups people have about unmanned aircraft, especially when it comes to regulations in airspace, you know.
Right, makes sense. The U.S. airspace is a mess. Having a pilot option probably makes it a lot easier to get the Vanguard into the system, so to speak.
Exactly. And then there's the testing and development side. Having a pilot on board, especially early on, means you're getting real-time feedback, real-time adjustments, stuff you just wouldn't get with a purely unmanned system.
It's like having a human debugger right there in the cockpit. So they're gathering data, refining the tech much faster, all while navigating the regulatory maze. That's pretty smart.
It is. And this whole dual approach thing, that's not even the only trick up their sleeve. The way they designed and built this thing is just as mind-blowing as the aircraft itself. Ever heard of Northrop Grumman's Digital Pathfinder?
Digital Pathfinder. It sounds like we're about to enter the matrix of aviation design here. Give me the rundown.
Basically, it means they went full-on digital for the entire process. Design, building, even testing the aircraft. We're talking about a digital twin of the Model 437 before they even touched a single piece of metal.
Hold on. A digital twin? So no more clunky prototypes or endless paper blueprints?
Exactly. With Digital Pathfinder, they can play around with designs, test materials. Heck, they can even simulate flights, all virtually.
That's wild. So how did they actually use this digital wizardry to create the Model 437?
Okay, so you know how incredibly complex aircraft wings are, right?
Oh, yeah. They have to be light, but crazy strong, aerodynamic, but able to withstand insane forces. It's a delicate balance.
You got it. And that's where Digital Pathfinder comes in. They could experiment with different wing shapes, materials, internal structures, all virtually. It's like having a virtual wind tunnel at your fingertips.
That's incredible. So they went through, I don't know how many iterations before they even thought about building a real prototype.
Pretty much. And get this, they even used 3D printing to create parts of the Model 437.
Wait, 3D printing for a real aircraft? What did they print?
They used a process called plasma arc energy deposition to create a titanium structural bracket. And this is a big deal because it's thought to be the first time this specific 3D printing method has been used for a titanium part on a military aircraft.
Now that's pushing boundaries. It's not just about the jet itself, it's about revolutionizing how these things are made.
100%. And this whole digital thread, as they call it, it doesn't stop at design and manufacturing. It goes way beyond that, but we'll get into that a bit later.
Okay, so they've built this incredible digital world, used it to design and build this cutting-edge aircraft, but what's the big takeaway? Is this the new normal for aviation?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, it's too early to say for sure. What they've done is groundbreaking, but can it be scaled up? Can you imagine building every aircraft, fighter jets, passenger planes this way?
That's true. Building a handful of advanced jets for the military is one thing, but what about building thousands of planes for commercial airlines? Talk about a logistical nightmare.
Exactly. First off, this level of digital integration, it takes a massive investment. Software, hardware, training, it's not cheap. And it's not like flipping a switch.
So it's like having the coolest smartphone, but not everyone can afford it or even knows how to use half the features.
Exactly. And there's a learning curve, right?
Yeah.
Moving from traditional design and manufacturing to a fully digital system takes time, expertise, and a willingness to adapt.
It's a totally different way of thinking.
Absolutely. But the potential here is huge. If Northrop Grumman can prove that this digital-first approach gets results, faster development, lower costs, increased efficiency, then yeah, it could be a game changer for aviation as a whole.
So the Model 437 Vanguard, maybe it's not just a glimpse into the future of military aviation, but a glimpse into the future of flight, period.
Exactly. Oh, and speaking of the future, remember how this whole thing started as a loyal wingman drone concept?
Oh yeah, the fighter jet's trusty sidekick. Whatever happened to that idea?
Well, it turns out the unmanned version of the Model 437, now called the Model 401, it's still very much alive. In fact, Aviation Week reported that they're seriously considering putting it into production.
Wait, so they're building two versions of the same aircraft, one with a pilot, one without.
You got it. It seems Northrop Grumman is hedging its bets, looking at the potential of unmanned systems while acknowledging the advantages of having a human in the loop, at least for now.
So are we talking about a future where we have squadrons of these unmanned vanguards flying alongside their human piloted counterparts? That's some serious sci-fi stuff right there. But what are the real benefits of having unmanned fighter jets in the mix? And are there any downsides we should be thinking about?
Well, purely from a tactical perspective, unmanned aircraft have some serious advantages. They can pull off maneuvers that would make even the most seasoned pilots sick. They don't get tired, they don't get distracted, and they're not limited by the limits of a human body.
So we're talking about flying machines that can pull off insane aerial acrobatics 24/7, no coffee breaks needed.
You got it. Plus, no pilot means you can make the aircraft smaller, lighter, maybe even stealthier. No need for all those bulky life support systems or ejection seats.
It's like designing a race car purely for speed with no compromises for a human driver.
Exactly. But, and this is a big but, unmanned systems, especially when you're talking about autonomous weapons platforms, they come with some heavy ethical baggage.
Yeah, no kidding. We're talking about machines making life or death decisions on the battlefield. That's a whole other can of worms.
Absolutely. And those are conversations we definitely need to have as this technology keeps developing. But we can circle back to that later.
Okay, so we've got these two versions of the Vanguard in development, the optionally manned 437 and the fully unmanned 401. But how did they even decide on this two-pronged approach? What was the thought process there?
Well, it seems like Northrop Grumman had a vision from the start to create a versatile aircraft that could adapt to the ever-changing landscape of modern warfare.
So they weren't just building an aircraft, they were building a platform, something that could be customized for whatever the mission called for.
Exactly. And to understand how they did that, we need to talk about one of the coolest things about the Model 437, its open architecture system.
Okay, open architecture sounds intriguing, but break it down for me. What does that even mean? And why is it such a big deal?
All right, imagine your smartphone, right? You could swap out your memory card, get more storage, download new apps, all to keep your phone up to date and customized.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this.
Open architecture in a military aircraft is like that, but on a much bigger scale. It means the Vanguard systems are designed to be modular, upgradable. New sensors, weapon systems, software updates, they can all be integrated easily.
So it's like future-proofing the Vanguard. They're not just designing it for today's battles. They're designing it to evolve as technology changes.
You got it. They can basically add new capabilities to the Vanguard without having to build a whole new plane. Talk about efficient.
That's incredible. So it's not just a single aircraft. It's a constantly evolving platform.
Precisely. And it opens up all sorts of possibilities for mission flexibility. And remember that data probe we talked about, the one that gives the Vanguard that futuristic look?
Oh, yeah. It's hard to miss. What about it?
Well, that's not just for looks. That probe houses some of the Vanguard's most advanced sensor technology. It can gather and process crazy amounts of information. And here's where that open architecture comes in again.
Okay, you've got me on the edge of my seat.
Because it's open architecture, they can integrate even more advanced sensors as they become available. Think of it like upgrading your computer's graphics card to play the latest video games. But instead, we're talking about giving the Vanguard an even better ability to see and understand threats in the heat of the moment.
Okay, this is some next level stuff. It's like they're building a flying sensor platform. But what are the strategic implications of that? What does it mean for how battles are fought?
That's where it gets really interesting. Imagine the Vanguard with all its fancy sensors and open architecture acting as the brain for a whole network of military assets. We're talking fighter jets, surveillance drones, ground-based radar, maybe even satellite networks, all connected, all sharing information seamlessly.
So the Vanguard is like the conductor of an orchestra, but instead of instruments, it's coordinating a symphony of destruction.
That's one way to put it. But the point is, it creates a level of battlefield awareness and coordination that we can only dream of right now.
Okay, but let's not forget about the drone version, the Model 401. How does this open architecture thing play into its role?
That's where things get really interesting. Imagine a whole squadron of Model 401 drones, each with its own set of sensors, networked together through the Vanguard. You could blanket an entire airspace with surveillance, getting real-time intel back to the Vanguard and any other manned aircraft in the area.
It's like having a flock of birds with eyes everywhere, feeding information back to a central brain. That's a game changer.
Exactly. And because they're unmanned, these drones can take on missions that would be way too risky for humans. Scouting ahead, recon in dangerous airspace, even acting as decoys to protect the manned aircraft.
It sounds like the Model 401 could seriously change how air combat works. But with all this talk about drones and AI, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, right?
The ethics of it all.
Exactly. Where do we draw the line when it comes to machines making decisions in war?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's something that everyone's grappling with, military strategists, ethicists, policymakers. Even though the Model 401 isn't being designed as a fully autonomous weapon system, its development does raise some tough questions about where warfare is heading.
It's not just about the tech itself, but about how we use it. It's like they say, even the most advanced tools are only as good as the people using them.
100%. That's why these conversations are so important. We need to be thinking about these ethical questions now, setting clear guidelines, making sure that humans are still the ones making the final call, especially when lives are on the line.
It's a huge responsibility, but it's also exciting, right? I mean, we're talking about the future of warfare here. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Absolutely. And speaking of the future, there's one more thing about the Model 437 that's worth mentioning. Remember when we were talking about its open architecture and its potential?
You know, I love when you say that. What else does this thing have in store for us?
Well, let's talk about directed energy weapons.
Hold on, are we talking about lasers here? Like actual laser beams shooting out of the sky?
You got it. Laser weapons are still in the early stages, but companies like Northrop Grumman are making big moves. And the Model 437, with its open architecture and all those sensors, it could be the perfect platform to test and deploy this tech.
Okay, I need a minute to process this. Are you saying we could see a future where the Model 437 is armed with lasers? That sounds like something straight out of Star Wars.
It's closer than you might think. Imagine fighter jets engaging targets at the speed of light, taking out critical infrastructure or enemy aircraft with pinpoint accuracy, minimal collateral damage. No more missiles, no big explosions, just a focused beam of energy.
It's mind-blowing, but also kind of terrifying. What does that mean for the future of warfare?
That's the big question. On the one hand, you have the potential to make warfare more precise, reduce civilian casualties. On the other hand, you're talking about really powerful weapons, which could lead to an arms race, escalate conflicts.
It's a double-edged sword, for sure. Like any powerful tech, it's all about how we choose to use it.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to talk about this now, to think about the consequences.
It's not just about building bigger, badder weapons, but about being responsible, using technology to create a safer world.
100%. The Model 437 Vanguard is a testament to human ingenuity, our ability to push boundaries. But it also reminds us that we have to use this technology wisely if we want to create a better future.
Well said. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's come back down to earth for a second. We've talked about the future, but what about the here and now? What can we learn from the development of the Vanguard?
Great question. One of the big takeaways here is the power of digital engineering.
Right, Northrop Grumman's Digital Pathfinder. How's that changing the game?
Well, think about the traditional way we design and build aircraft. It's always been a very linear process. Design, build a prototype, test it, make changes, build another prototype, rinse and repeat. Time-consuming, expensive, and it often leads to delays.
Not to mention all the wasted resources when those prototypes don't work out.
Exactly. With Digital Pathfinder, Northrop Grumman has essentially created a digital sandbox where they can design, test, and refine their aircraft virtually before they ever build a physical model.
So it's like having a giant virtual Lego set where they can try out different ideas without the risk of wasting real-world resources.
Pretty much. This allows them to identify and fix potential problems early on, streamline the entire development process, save money, and ultimately build a better product.
So it's not just about building a cool new jet, it's about changing how we build all aircraft.
Absolutely. And the implications go way beyond military applications. Imagine commercial aircraft designed this way. We could have a whole new generation of planes that are lighter, more fuel efficient, and maybe even cheaper to build.
Now that's a future I can get behind. Safer, greener, and more affordable air travel for everyone. Sign me up.
But we can't forget about the other groundbreaking aspect of the Model 437 program. Its hybrid design.
Yes, the drone to daredevil concept. What's interesting here is that it's not about choosing between manned and unmanned. It's about using both.
So instead of replacing pilots with robots, it's about giving pilots more options, more flexibility on the battlefield.
Exactly. And this tech has applications beyond the military. Imagine optionally manned aircraft being used for everything. Disaster relief, search and rescue, cargo transport, even passenger travel. Okay, now my mind is really blown. Aircraft that can switch between manned and unmanned modes depending on the situation, that's a future I want to see.
Me too. And it's a future that Northrop Grumman is helping to create. The Model 437 Vanguard isn't just a new aircraft, it's a whole new way of thinking about aviation.
It's like they looked at everything we thought we knew about planes and said, hold my drink.
Something like that. They're not just reacting to trends, they're anticipating what's next, pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
It's taking what we see in sci-fi movies and making it real. But with all this futuristic tech, it's important to remember that the Model 437 is still pretty new. We don't know what the future holds, but one thing's for sure.
What's that?
Northrop Grumman is playing the long game here. They're not just building for today, they're building for tomorrow, and that's something to be excited about.
I completely agree. The Model 437 Vanguard, it's not just a technological marvel, it's a testament to human ingenuity.
It's like that saying, Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And the Model 437, with its shape-shifting abilities, its open architecture, the potential for lasers and AI, it definitely has that magic touch.
It really does make you think. The future is what we make it. We have the power to imagine and create amazing things.
Well said. And that feels like the perfect note to end on. So from stealthy drone to high-tech, optionally manned jet, the Model 437 Vanguard has definitely captured our imagination.
It's been a pleasure diving deep into this with you.
And with you, our amazing listeners, remember, the future is out there waiting to be written. Stay curious, keep asking questions, and we'll see you next time.